Hey everyone, welcome to the Wonder Lab. In this episode, I sit down with Monsignor James Shea, President of the University of Mary, to explore how culture, technology, and secularization shape our understanding of reality. We discuss the challenge of navigating today's digital world, the importance of real human connection, and why a return to wonder is more necessary than ever. If you enjoy this conversation, please like and subscribe for more episodes of the Wonder Lab. Now let's dive in. I've noticed in your writings, in your talks, you have a keen interest in questions of environment, in questions of the ambient culture. You know, there's a lot of thinkers who focus on the trees. There's a sense in which you have a sensitivity for the forest and where we are as a culture. I'm curious where that came from.
Well, well, I think it's a necessity for someone like me. You know, I'm not living in an ivory tower. I'm in the rough and tumble of work with college students every day, and it's important to me that at the University of Mary, we have our finger on the pulse of the ambient culture because we're asked to serve it. You know what I mean? In other words, we want those who are out in the world and who are looking for an education, whether it's a Catholic education or whether they're looking for one of our specialty areas, you know, if they want to get a doctorate in physical therapy or study nursing with us or get a degree in education, because we're a mixed campus. We've got a lot of students here who are very deeply interested in the Catholic faith and making sure that they get a faithful Catholic Newman Guide kind of education. But then we have a lot of students here as well who are here because they want to play NCAA Division II baseball, or because they want to, get a business degree or one of our highly rated programs. And so as a result, I'm always thinking about the University of Mary as a melting pot, or better, a laboratory of the new evangelization. And so I think that that's one of the motives for me that I need as a matter of necessity to be a subject matter expert about the people whom I'm serving, which are young people who are growing up in this culture, or working adults who are living and working in this culture who are coming back for a higher degree. And so I don't think that it would be right for me to be disinterested in that. But I used the phrase new evangelization just a moment ago. Of course, that's a catchphrase introduced into the Catholic world by Pope St. John Paul II. I think he gave a speech maybe in 1983 in Port-au-Prince in Haiti to the Latin American bishops, where he said that the new evangelization is the old evangelization. It's the proclamation of the Lordship of Jesus Christ, but that it would be new in ardor, method, and expression. And, you know, I had the great honor of living and studying in Rome during sort of the final years of the pontificate of John Paul II, who I think indisputably was the man of the 20th century. And so as a result, his interest, although his mind eclipses my own capacities by many orders of magnitude, yeah, he just had a deep influence on the way that I see the world and the way that I think about things. And then I'm surrounded by friends. Of course, I don't do this work on my own. I have colleagues here at the University of Mary, both in my administrative team and on the faculty, and then friends in the wider world who assist me in puzzling through these questions and thinking about them. And so I think all of that conspires to point my interests in that direction.
What do you think in terms of your own biography? When did you feel a sense that something has shifted? Was there a time in your life where you felt like the culture you grew up in, the ways in which it was easier to be a Christian, something had shifted, there had been a sea change?
I grew up in the last gasp of Christendom. You know, I grew up on a farm in the last moments before the internet, so it was the early to mid '90s. when I was coming into the wider world, going off to college. And I first went just 100 miles from the farm to a small Presbyterian liberal arts school where I got my first taste of what the intellectual life really could be. You know, I was a farm kid. I grew up milking cows and reading books. You know, it wasn't like we didn't have discussions about things that mattered at home. My parents were deeply engaged in ideas of faith and even ideas of politics, but I was mesmerized by my time when I first came into university studies. And then I went off to Catholic University in Washington, D.C., where I finished my bachelor's and did my master's as a seminarian before going off to Rome. The distance between Hazleton, North Dakota, a town of 200, in the early 90s, from there to Washington, D.C. in the late 90s, you might as well have gone to Saturn or Neptune. You know what I mean? It was just a completely different thing because secularization had already very much taken hold during the Clinton years in Washington, D.C. And it was clear that I wasn't living in a Christian culture out there. And then Italy was interesting. When I finally finished at Catholic U, I went to Rome for theological studies. And of course, Europe, when you study in Rome, you're also going to France and Belgium and England and Spain and Germany. And to go around and see these tremendous monuments to Christendom, most of which were empty or tourist traps, but not places for worship and prayer, which is what they were built with or for. That was deeply instructive to me. And so I think it was just a matter of noticing my surroundings. But it wasn't that I was sitting there as a cultural prognosticator. I'm not really that observant in that way. It was just that I had grown up in a particular way, and then I was plunged into a very different reality.
Right. I had a sense of the one time I visited North Dakota, and this was maybe it was 10 years ago, and it was a very funny feeling. I was living, living in New York at the time, but I pulled over at a gas station, and it was rather late at night, and was traveling on some shoot, and I had this unbelievable sense of nostalgia for what it felt like to be in the early 90s. There was a sense of something I was experiencing there reminded me of what it felt like to grow up in the early 90s before kind of the explosion of the virtual world. And I don't know what it was exactly, but do you have a sense of what was that? What is that reality that has become harder to find today?
Well, you know who has a sense for that and who can answer this question is a person named Archbishop Charles Chaput. So Archbishop Chaput, when he was first named a bishop, people don't remember this about him because, of course, he was a sort of tremendous figure, first in Denver and then in Philadelphia. But before that, he was the bishop of Rapid City, South Dakota. And right before he turned 75, so right before he retired as Archbishop of Philadelphia, he came here to the University of Mary. We have an event called the Vocations Jamboree. Tim, it's the most fun I ever have. I think 60 religious communities send representatives to this Vocations Jamboree, and then maybe 15 to 20 service organizations, Christ in the City, or evangelical evangelism apostolates like SPO, NET, Focus. And so everybody kind of descends on campus for a couple of days, and our students are just, they're rolling around in mud and sunshine. I mean, it's extraordinary with all of these different habits, and it's really spectacular. We're trying to normalize vocational generosity. But every year we have a significant Catholic who comes in, and Archbishop Chaput came once again just before he retired. And he gave a talk here about the Dakotas, and he compared it to the Shire in the writings of J.R.R. Tolkien. And I think that there's something about that. In other words, the agrarian neighborliness. There's a blight upon Minnesota. I think it's partly justified. Minnesota nice is what they say, which is their way of saying that in Minnesota, people pretend like they're
Right.
they're truly charitable, but they're just being nice and behind your back, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the Dakotas really still are quite neighborly, and everybody's, at least until the oil boom of the early 2010s. Everybody was just one generation from the farm. I remember I used to teach high school here, and when I would call roll at the beginning of my class at St. Mary's High School, which is the largest Catholic high school in the state, based on their last name, I could tell them where their grandparents were from, if they were from, Flasher or Napoleon or Linton or Strasburg or any of these little North Dakota towns, just because everybody knows that. And so I think that that's part of the aspect of it. I think what's interesting, Tim, is that the political dynamics of the last 15 years have had an interesting effect on North Dakota in that I think during certain progressive administrations in Washington, there's been a circling of the wagons here, and so people were trying to make sure that we were keeping out those influences. And then I think the current moment has been different in that particular aspects of conservative populism have interestingly gotten into the bloodstream here, such that now, for the first time, we're starting to talk and think a lot like the broader culture. And of course, there are other things, social media and the internet. We have that here along with running water, and so there has been that. But it is, as I think one of the reasons the University of Mary's grown so tremendously is that parents do have a sense of comfort or security in sending their sons and daughters, whom they've worked so very hard to form and shape in the faith, to a place where it still hangs in the air, but we're far from perfect.
Do you have a sense of this cultural shift? I mean, we've talked about that something has been lost or something has shifted, and I think it has something to do with the internet, but it has to do with probably movements, and you've talked about this that date back centuries. Is there any insights that you could offer in terms of what has fundamentally shifted in our felt sense of being human in this world?
Yeah. Well, I've said before that modernity didn't begin with a rejection of God, that it began with a rejection of the doctrine of original sin. But let's back up and consider the rejection of God, in that modernity has resulted, if not in a militant atheism, it does result somewhat in that, but more often in a kind of practical atheism, what Christian Smith at Notre Dame has called he's called it, now why am I blanking on it? He's called it therapeutic deism.
Moralistic therapeutic. Yeah.
Moralistic therapeutic deism.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you for rescuing me. That was a lifeline. I was about to drown. Moralistic therapeutic deism, and he said that that's the primary religion, not just of young people, whom he studies as a sociologist, but of the whole culture. And this is it's distinguishable from atheism in the possibility of a divine figure is acknowledged, but there's not much use for it. You're just supposed to be a good person. And so I think that what's happened is that, and this is quite new, in the ancient pagan cultures, there was always a sense for the divine. And of course, certainly in Judaism and Christianity, which follows upon it, a vibrant and clear sense for the movement of God among men. And I think that what happens is that when you deny a divine or transcendent order completely, the possibility of it, when you rule it as out of bounds, you do it, of course, now all of the old myths of the gods founding cities and teaching humanity about how fire works and all of those things, you can dispatch with those. But if you go so far as to say that there's no transcendent reality at all, that there's no such thing as divinity, and that we don't have commerce with the divine, all of a sudden you have a vision of life which is inadequate to the human mind and human experience. And so life is emptied of its momentous quality. And this becomes profoundly constricting. And I think what happens is that people grow very, very, very sad and profoundly restless as a result of that. Now, there's a lot of complexity that I'm glossing over, but I think that that's what we've seen happen, is that the denial of God. My friend Father Mike Schmitz says that if there's no God, you can do anything you want, but then nothing that you do matters. But if there is God, you can't do anything that you want, but then everything that you do matters. And if one has to choose a life, one would choose the last one, I think, any day of the week, that my actions matter. And if they don't, then what's the meaning of life? There's no meaning. And so I think people have lost that sense of meaning. And all of the promises, I'm sorry to harp on this, but all of the promises that are made to us about what it could be like if we throw off our shackles, what it could be like if we adopt a definition of freedom which is really licensed to do whatever I want. All the old shackles fall down, and we have nothing to lose but our chains. The mottos of some of these progressivist or utopian visions. Well, what in the world? In the end, it devolves into shop till you drop. In other words, there's nothing left except choosing shoes on Amazon. It's very lifeless, and it just isn't adequate. No one wants to live like that. And so, as a result, look around. Are people like dying of happiness? Are we just killing it as a culture, to use a phrase of my students? Are we killing it? We're not. We're being killed.
So the sense that the denial, the refusal to accept original sin results in just one utopian ideology after another, where we're trying to create human perfectibility, and that's kind of led us today with this very strange transhumanist movement merging with technology. What role do you see technology playing in this? How has it kind of clouded our vision about what knowledge is? How has it played into this self-creation myth that we're really under the shadow of?
Well, let's start by acknowledging how great technology is. And technology is something that human beings have always valued and prized. In other words, I don't think that technology in and of itself is the problem. It's the ideology that underlies it. It's that we've stopped asking the vital question, just because we can do something, should we do it? And so Aristotle, as you know, has four causes, four aspects of reality that he delineates in terms of knowing what a thing is, or how to judge or analyze any given thing. And the ancients and our Christian forebears were deeply interested in what Aristotle calls the formal and the final cause. In other words, what's the essence of the thing and what's it for? And this was endlessly fascinating, and that's really the purpose of a contemplative aspect, that you're gazing at the thing in hopes of it revealing itself to you. You're turning it over, or you're following it, or you're considering it, and there's a deep reverence in that. We've become very, very, very interested in an obsessive way, not with those two causes, the final and the formal, but with the material and the efficient. And so what is something made of, and what can it do? And so it's a huge gap, because now when we're asking, what is that thing? Of course, human beings have always asked that. We're made to ask that question. What is that? Little children ask that question, but they ask it with a whole lot more wonder than we oftentimes bring to the table, because we've been so conditioned now. When the ancients asked, what is that thing, they meant, what's the essence of it, and what is it for? How does it fulfill its purpose? What is its excellence? And we scarcely ever ask questions along those lines anymore. We ask, what is that thing made of? What's its material? And then what can we do with it? Like what's it good for, practically speaking? And these are not insubstantial questions. Of course, they're important questions. Aristotle said that we should ask them. They just don't get us to the heart of the matter. They don't reveal the truth of things. And so when you match the power of technology with that outlook toward life, that kind of ideological sense for seeing the world, everything does flatten out, and it becomes difficult to discern what the purpose and the meaning behind things are. That then leads to, what I think is a resurgence of Gnostic thought in our time, and that takes a particular shape in our postmodern world with technique. In other words, everything is a technique, and so we can approach things by having a formula or a manner of action which can unlock the secrets behind various things. Of course, that goes to my old friend Francis Bacon, who was Lord Chancellor of England, but who really stands at the dawn of the modern age. I think Descartes actually had plagiarized quite a bit from Bacon, and Bacon was the one who said knowledge is power. People love that. They painted on the sides of elementary schools, knowledge is power. The meaning, I think, that people take of it is that, if you get a good education, you'll be able to amplify your life. That's not what he meant at all. He meant that the purpose of knowledge isn't to understand or to plumb the depths of things. The purpose of knowledge is power over nature. It's not real science. It's magic in a certain sense, and so we've taken that understanding and we've applied it. So then there are no boundaries. You mentioned transhumanism, sex transition, any number of things, modern weaponry. These are questions where the moral aspect of things is quite deliberately set to the side, and what we're all about, what we're profoundly interested in instead is, how can we better the human estate, which in the end leads to questions of the power of some people over other people. It's very tricky business. So I want to go on record saying how good technology is when it's fueled by an adequate vision of reality, so that people don't think I'm some kind of troglodyte.
Yeah. There is something, I wrestle with the question about technology, whether it's neutral or whether there are certain technologies that have inherent biases that are not neutral because they're built with addictive qualities or with the intention of getting you hooked. And so I feel like I'm perhaps the worst model in terms of my own use of technology, given the work that I do and emails and beeps. And how do you approach this question of digital technology today, knowing all of the research that we're seeing more and more is that this stuff is having a detrimental effect? How do you, offer guidance to people who are increasingly aware that there is something here that needs to be dealt with virtue?
Well, that's a very big question. Virtue is an important point, isn't it? Because there are all kinds of benefits which one can point to. Sometimes the benefit masquerades as a real benefit when it's more ambiguous than that. You know what I mean? So, for instance, I haven't used email in more than 10 years. And that was just a prudential decision that I made because it was sort of eating my life alive. In the work that I was doing, emails would pile up. My inbox would be infinite, and And I found myself getting pulled into all kinds of disputes where, things would get escalated very quickly to the level of my office that had no business being there, that people should be dealing with them in different ways. And and there was an inherent injustice in email in that people could send me an email or I could send them an email which took 30 seconds to formulate, which could require 4 or 5 hours to respond to, whereas there's more parity in a conversation. If I call you on the phone, you talk for 5 minutes, I talk for 5 minutes. There's more equilibrium there between things. And so I find myself texting quite a bit, and I like that. There's an efficiency about it. There's an impersonal nature to it as well, though, and so that I'm a little bit uncomfortable with. It is the case that you've of course read the reports about how the titans of Silicon Valley, who have designed most of the technology that everybody's addicted to, that they don't let their children anywhere near this stuff because they know that it's weapons grade addictive technology. And I'll never forget, I was here on campus in the residence of one of our resident assistants, and his daughter came over to me and picked up my iPhone and opened my photos and started flipping through them. Well, she had never touched an iPhone before. She was 2 years old or something, and I realized, oh my goodness, this design has hacked the human mind. It's quite intuitive in that respect, and then the reward centers of the brain are very fixated on this. I think that there's a certain sense in which, and I have to say this very carefully, there's a certain sense in which this is all quite good, in that I'm hopeful that we're emerging from a time in which we thought that these things were just super exciting and good in an absolute way. I think that nobody thinks that anymore. And they didn't need Jonathan Haidt to write a book about it in order to be disabused of their attraction. I think that people are finding out that it makes them profoundly unhappy. And so more and more people are unplugging. And I promote that. I think that's quite good. Do I do it perfectly? Well, it's hard. There's a lot going on all the time. In order to stay on top of it, I'm very often more plugged in than I'd like to be. And when I'm traveling, for instance, it's the way that I can stay connected with the main campus. All of that's quite good, but it also means that there's more limited space for leisure and contemplation. You heard, didn't you, that there was an announcement in the late 1960s that within a generation, America would move to a 4-day work week because of technological progress. Of course, things have gone completely in the other direction. George Jetson, who would have been, as we're recording this, I think he would have been 23 years old or 22 years old or something like that. In other words, we're into the age of the Jetsons now. Was it supposed to have taken place in 2060 or 2040 or something like that? Anyway, but he worked like 2 hours a week, and that's what the future was supposed to be like. Well, all of that's nonsense. Of course, he couldn't be happy working 2 hours a week, but nobody's happy working 80 hours a week either. And so how does one get an integration, not a balance, but an integration? That's an interesting question and an important one.
Then this whole move, and especially I think in the next few years with AI and AI agents and all of this, and there's the promise again, I think we hear it today probably more loudly than it's been in the culture maybe since the 1960s, is that these things will replace all the burden of work and we'll be entering into another new era of leisure. Is your sense, knowing human nature, that that's not going to work? What is your sense of why is it that human beings, even with microwaves and all of these things, and we live a quality of life that's much, at least on the material level, so much better than even, kings and queens back in, 1,000 years ago. Why can't we just peacefully go about our day and have leisure? What's the problem?
Well, we don't really want leisure is the problem. Abbott Nault, has written that book, The Noonday Devil, about sloth, acedia. Kathleen Norris and others also have interesting works on acedia. And they all call it the besetting sin of our time. And that connects with something that we were talking about earlier, that because we don't have a transcendent horizon, because we've disabused ourselves of our angelic nature, that we have that we share with the angels and with God, an intellect and a will, that we have these higher faculties in addition to our animal qualities, the emotive and the sense faculties that we have. Because we don't have a transcendent horizon, there is a profound sadness which enters into us. Sloth or acedia, has been popularly understood as just being lazy, lying on the couch. That's not the deeper meaning of it. It's a sadness when confronted with the greatness of one's calling, a drawing back from from the momentous nature of the meaning of one's life, a shrinking from the magnanimity, the greatness of soul to which we're called. I think that this is very much our time, and so there is not an external fix for that. And indeed, this goes back to the inadequacy of the technique which contemporary Gnosticism prescribes for us. Christianity doesn't say anything about that. It says that we were dead and we were brought back to life by the Paschal mystery. In other words, the incarnation, the dying and the rising of the Christ is that's how you get the new human. Christians are an entirely new kind of human from the old kind of human. Our nature has been regenerated because God has invested us with His divinity. That's a whole different type of thing. And I think because we've disavowed the possibility of that, we're going to be unhappy no matter what. And so Blaise Pascal, talked about the torture of being in one's room with one's thoughts, and the all manner of mischief in the world and all the evils of the human race can come down to that a man is unable to sit for a half hour by himself in his own room. Well, the famous experiments at the University of Virginia with the college students and their shockers, administering high voltage electronic shocks to themselves to numb the pain of being alone, that points to that as well. And so I think that we don't know how to be at rest. And so if technology comes alongside us, and AI and mechanization of industry and everything does all of our work for us, it's not going to make us happier because it only opens up possibilities for more interesting kinds of food on our Instagram feeds and more exotic holidays and vacations. This whole thing of a bucket list is very perplexing. And so I don't mean to rant and rave, Tim, but I think that's the thing. We are a culture which is gripped by acedia, and we first deny the height of our calling, and then we're still sad about it because we can't shake it. And so that grief, my spiritual director says that sin is just unrelated grief that hasn't been brought to the healing power of grace. And so I think that we have a deep grief about our lives, and until that's dealt with at its root, we're in bad shape.
Mm. You know, what was interesting in some of the work we're doing on this film about Carlo Acutis, and
Yeah. Isn't he great?
it was an incredible
great.
incredible opportunity to look at his life, and then to put his life in relationship to young people. So we follow 150 young people that the University of Mary sponsor on this pilgrimage, and it was an amazing thing where they put their phones aside and go on this pilgrimage. And it was a pilgrimage. It wasn't a tourist trip. That was really what and to see them come alive. And one of the things that you say in the film is that they become more human as they become less digital. And we sort of see that. And as they go, they learn more about Carlo Acutis, and they visit him in Assisi. And I think for those of us that have worked on the film and have started to look at his life, there's a way in which Carlo was positioned as kind of the digital saint in a somewhat of a superficial way, perhaps. Whereas when you go deeper, you realize that actually he was using the medium to point people back to in-person encounters, to the sacraments, to an encounter of wonder in nature. There was a way in which he uses technology as a means towards reconnecting people to the real. And I just wondered if you could share, a little bit about why at the University of Mary do you sponsor this pilgrimage, and just some of the fruit that you've seen come out of that. Because for us, on the filming, it was really quite a beautiful thing, and it gave a lot of hope. So we talked. There's clearly all, as an Irishman, I could sit and talk to you for hours about everything that's wrong, but it is nice at the end to to bring in a little hope.
Yes, that's right. The melancholic of our people does need and this is why Christianity can make inroads among the Celts, isn't it? That we know that we just need the light so badly. So let me back up just for a moment. And address your question by first saying that I think your read on Carlo is quite right. That he was pointing people to in-person relationships, and especially to prayer. And the thing that the digital world has done, I spoke earlier about the sort of mechanism of an iPhone hacking the human reward system and being very intuitive. I think that there's something much deeper and actually more sinister about it, in that we are wired for access to this vast invisible world. That human beings, we look to the stars. The other animals don't do that, but we look to the stars because we're trying to see what's beyond them, and so as a result, we have this deep, irresistible hunger that can't be eliminated from us for concert with an invisible world. We need that. This is why we pray. Sister Wendy Beckett, you remember her? She was supposedly cloistered, but she would be brought out from solitude from time to time, and the BBC would zip her around to all of these different museums where she would, comment on the works of the Louvre or the Uffizi or the Academia or the London Portrait Gallery, and she once did a segment on the cave paintings, which are these prehistoric paintings in southern France, and she was very, very moved to see them because they were evidence of prayer for her. And I think she was right, that the cave paintings were a testament that humanity is always it always has been as it is, that our nature is to reach up into the infinite and to grab all that we can, and so the problem with the internet isn't that it's useful. Its usefulness is quite great. The problem with it is that it can replace prayer. It can replace it. It gives the illusion of a vast invisible world full of fascinating, unknown reality that one's mind can roam through and receive from. And, if I were the devil, I would say, wow, that's great. If I can find a way to infiltrate that, like if I can load it up with pornography or if I can just get people to use it to waste vast, massive amounts of time and to sort of squander their life with it, wow, I'm right on that. And indeed, I think that's what happened. And so Carlo was deeply, deeply connected to the true transcendent, invisible world. And so because he had an attachment, I don't say an addiction, but an attachment to that, he was impervious in a certain sense to the pitfalls and the dangers of the digital world. This is beautiful, great, terrific, and so that's what one wants. So then, what are we trying to do at the University of Mary by taking all of these high school students over to our Rome campus and then to Assisi and all of that, and asking them quite deliberately to set aside their phones and to detox while they're there? Well, we're trying to show them another mode of being. We're trying to give them a taste. The Italians would say an assaggio of what it means to live truly. And you see them flower because they were made for that. It's not like, they're so corrupted that there's nothing good left in them. People, the Irish, when they gaze at the young people today, it's the melancholic it loses hope. But if you want hope, look at what happens when you take young people, just regular young high school students, and you take them out of their native habitat, and give them a deck of cards and a prayer book. Wow! All of a sudden, they take to that like a duck to water because they were made for it, and they're interacting with each other in a new way. The loves of their heart become more vibrant and true for them, and they begin to think about what's next for them in life. I cannot tell you, Tim, I cannot tell you how many young men and women on that pilgrimage discovered that they were called to the priesthood of the religious life. Amazing. How does that happen? Well, it's they for the first time in their life, they're confronted with a stretch of silence and true rest, and then the voice of God, which is imperceptible amidst the noise and the chaos of the world in which they're living. All of a sudden, it lifts for a moment, and the Lord says, "You, I desire you. I'm ready for you. I'm waiting for you," and then they follow. And so this is very beautiful. And so that's what we want. We want to give them a glimpse. Henry David Thoreau said that he went out to Walden Pond so that when he came to the end of his life, he would not find that he had never lived. This is a fear. Most men, he said, live lives, remember, of quiet desperation. We want for a moment to give them a respite from the desperation which has gripped their lives, even though they're 17 or 18. And when they're free of that for just a moment, all of a sudden they see that there's a different reality waiting for them, and they go for it. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. I think that's right on. I think that's a model for evangelization as well. I mean, I remember in high school first encountering Christ in the Eucharist, and it was as if the flat world that I was in gave way to this world of dimensionality, and there were times when that world would collapse back into the flatness, but you could never quite forget that sense of what it was like when the world opened up. And you have something then that's it's a substantial reality. The kingdom of God is there's a substantial reality to it, and if you can give people an experience of that, that's a type of evangelization that has some teeth, I think. And I think that the pilgrimage is a powerful way to do that.
Yeah, you know what's the genius behind it, and this is what you experienced. So these are all Catholic high school students. Many of them have been in Catholic education for 11 years or more, and so you'd expect that they would have that they would be really, the pump would be primed for them. It's not true, in that it's hard, first of all, for the church, even in the best of schools, to compete with the ambient culture on its own terms. But I think here what's helpful is the observation that St. John Henry Newman makes about the difference between notional knowledge and real knowledge. You know, so all of us know that we're going to die. We know that notionally. If we could pass an exam about it, if we were asked the question. But when someone very close to us dies, or when we have a brush with death because of a medical problem or because of an accident or something, all of a sudden that truth, which before was notional, becomes real. It's the same, you know, a bride spends months planning her wedding, and then on her honeymoon, she wakes up one morning and she says, oh my goodness, I'm going to spend the rest of my life with this person. It had been notional and now it's real. Or a father holds his firstborn son, and he knew that he would be a father. He had 9 months to get ready during his wife's pregnancy, and all of a sudden now he's holding this boy who depends upon him, and fatherhood is all of a sudden not notional anymore; it's real. And so I think that Newman here is very helpful in that he says that an insight about the faith is a dime a dozen. Notional knowledge is cheap. And what matters is that experiences are provided or engaged in or entered into that cause our notional knowledge to become real knowledge, and the whole faith comes alive for us. If that once happens, and here I admire our friends from the National Eucharistic Revival. Oh my goodness, what wonderful work they've done in the midst of the church, because it's a profound aspiration. If once a Catholic has a real encounter with Jesus in the Eucharist, it's really hard to shake that. And you see that, don't you? All kinds of people. Your friend, Martin Scorsese, you know what I mean? He's been wandering around making, well, I meant filmmaker. You're of his caliber, and should be even more successul than him, I suppose.
That's what I tell people. That's what I tell people.
That's right. But, you know, here's a guy who, by his own account, you know, had, as a little boy, he had these experiences at Mass, and he's been haunted by them the rest of his life, and everything that he's tried to make since then has been a grappling with that. This is the potency of the Catholic faith. Do you remember some years ago, and this wasn't a long time ago, but maybe 2018 or so, the Met, the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, determined that they were going to do an exhibit to showcase the religious influence upon design and art. And so, you know, to gather all kinds of different specimens of how Islam and Buddhism and Judaism and other religions have influenced the world of design. And so they launched this project. And do you know what the final product was? The final exhibit was, and I have a huge book on this. The final exhibit was, in the end, they just decided to do it with Catholicism. The Catholic faith was the only thing that they could find which had such a voluminous contribution to design and art in culture across every spectrum and every medium, that really, in the end, it became an extended, and it was at all the campuses. Like, I went to New York to see this, not just to see it. I was in New York and then I went to see it. I don't jet set for just to visit museums, but I went up to the cloisters, you know, on the Hudson, and the main place of the Met. And I think they even had something over at what then was the it had been the Whitney Museum of American Art, and it was the Met Breuer. Breuer is the architect, sort of the brutalist architect who designed the original buildings here at the University of Mary. And so I think at all three campuses of the Met, they had this exhibit of all kinds of art and design which was inspired by the Catholic faith. Well, this is the potency of the culture, the cultural expressions of Catholicism, which get deep into us. And so I think Carlo Acutis was on the forefront of that in the first days of what's now understood to be the digital age in which we live. He was saying, how can this be used for evangelization? That's a very profound insight. It's like St. Paul saying, okay, we've got roads and I can sail across the Mediterranean. Let's get to work.
I think that's right. I think he's sort of at the forefront of a movement that we're seeing now, too, of young people. His family wasn't religious, and yet he had this profound desire for God. This something drew him towards the church. And I think we're seeing that more and more now with people, coming to the faith. So we're in the midst of the end of something. A lot of institutions and churches maybe are closing, but yet at the same time, there's something new. And I think that's why maybe Carlo is significant. He's kind of at the forefront of this transitional period we're in. And I'm grateful for your contribution, to the film and the University of Mary. I think it's some of what we've been talking about. We've tried to, explore some of these themes in the film, and grateful to have the chance to talk in this format about these things, because I think they are, this is the world we're in, and we're in the midst of something that is different. There's something new happening. There's something that's trying to, I think, come forward, and I appreciate the way in which you look structurally, and in the way you look at the signs of the times. I find that very helpful. So I appreciate this conversation very much.
Oh, I'm very grateful to you, Tim, and I'm looking forward. Of course, I haven't seen the film or even had a sneak preview, but I think that the work that you and those who work with you are doing on it is terrifically important, and I'm eager to see it when it comes out. I think everybody who listens to these words also should share in my enthusiasm. I can't wait to see the film.
Absolutely. Well, God bless you, and we'll talk soon.
God bless you too. God bless you, Tim.